Okay. So I know everybody's tired. It's the last one. So we're going to do the fun stuff first, which is Liam is going to send me Bitcoin over Urbit from his laptop, not his phone. And I feel like that does make it more Kino. Yeah, Kino maximalism. All right. No, not a whole Bitcoin. Yeah. It's going to bounce through tondes-sitrym, which is the distribution ship for Volt, and also a liquidity and routing provider for it. This is Volt. This is Mischief's UI, very Kino UI right over here on the right. And then these are, so this is tondes-sitrym, the one I was just talking about, and tondes-sitrym, so you'll be able to see what happens during the relaying of the payment scrolling by. Okay, so we have just, by the way, an API that cuts this step out and lets you just directly send a payment. But so Lightning is pull pay. You pay to an invoice produced by the payee that you're trying. That lets you target a payment to their node. So I'm creating that right now. So I'm going to bill Liam 1,000 satoshis for Scooby Snacks. Okay. So this is, you can use this QR code. So it's an intrinsically QR code ready protocol for targeting these things, the invoice format. But I mean, questionable if using it on your phone is going to route it to the Volt app interface, I would think. But I could send it to you on Signal was my plan.
Well, it makes me Google's it by default. I can just copy.
Yeah, I mean, the usefulness of the QR here is more that, if somebody who's using an Earth Lightning wallet wants to pay you, an Urbit Volt chip, they can use this QR to do it, right? This will allow, any Lightning wallet anywhere in the world, to route to your ship. But yeah, so I'll actually send it to Liam. What, did you already decode it? Your phone decoded the Lightning, decoded the QR into the text string?
Yeah.
Based? We're making new discoveries all the time here. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Okay, you can watch.
Red looks bad.
Oh, just put in my ship name also besides the pay rack. Sorry. Oh, yeah, I may need to regenerate a new one since you should always, if you have the only reason not to put a ship name in is if, you're sending to an Earth Lightning node. That's just, the routing. Oh, yep. Okay. That worked. So now if... Yeah, and so I don't know if you probably couldn't see it very well, but before it said that theirs, meaning the amount of sats on Terrell's side of my channel with Terrell was 1,999. It's now 999, and I am up 1,000 sats, on my balance. Yeah. Yeah, so what happened here? A bunch of shit, scrolled through the dojo, et cetera. And why didn't I see? It's kind of surprising that I didn't see. Oh, because this is something to do with the UI. I'm getting errors here that are obscuring. Okay, so this is what we were looking for. Okay, so this was the invoice string that I generated and sent to Liam. Okay, so conceptually what's happening is that #dibtux is paying tondes-sitrym to pay tondes-sitrym. And these two payments are atomic. Either they both fail or they both succeed. And those payments are updating a small off-chain ledger that each of these pairs of nodes keeps between each other in such a way that the updates are cryptographically irreversible. And at every point in this process, if you lose contact with your peer, you can take one of those intermediate states and broadcast it to the Bitcoin blockchain, and it has the same settlable representation there that it does here off-chain. So what happens is, so this is from Tondes's perspective, I get an update at HTLC. So an HTLC is an in-flight payment right? So these states of the channels, right, are Bitcoin transactions, and we swap a new pre-signed transaction each time we want to update the state of the channel, right? So there's an intermediate state between, like, we finished the payment. The intermediate state is, so in addition to the output that pays a balance to me and pays a balance to you, there's also an output that is settled, that can be settled either by some secret that I created to make this invoice string before, right? Most of this invoice string is the hash of that secret that is needed to settle the output, or after a timeout, like if my peer becomes non-responsive. But we don't, these are Bitcoin outputs that are spendable on chain, which is important because we want this process to be interruptible at any time, and then fuck off. Jesus Christ. Okay. Okay. I think if I do that, hopefully this will stop maybe. Okay. So I could just like show you. Yeah, right. Okay. So we get a handle update add HTLC. So please add one of these like time or hash contract outputs like to the commitment state. It's immediately followed up with, we heard a new pre-signed transaction that is of a state for the channel. And then we respond by sending a revoke an ACK, which means like, so there was some previous state, right, which is now invalid. We don't want it to be able to be broadcast again. So we revoke our copy of that state by sending a penalty secret, which is a secret that the counterparty can use to spend all of the outputs in the transaction. So if I ever use that old state and broadcast it to chain, all of it can be swept and spent by the cheated upon counterparty. Okay, I'm gonna stop like going by the tondes flow and I'm gonna go by the distr flow. Okay, which started, let's see, accepted client Sarlev Sarsen. There's a button, Sarlev. There's a button, Sarlev. Did you see?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Handle the sign, maybe send settle. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So we send an add HTLC message. So like, in the case of Volt, every time we send an add HTLC message, we immediately follow it with a commitment signed because we're not doing a lot of onion routing or like high volumes of payments on Volt. So like, here, let's pivot a little bit to the code. Is this the? No, this is not the code. The code is. Yeah. Okay. I run Arch. I'm so sorry. Where are my little text diagrams? Oh, yeah, there we go, there we go. Ah, yes, okay. If you can see that, right, so conceptually we can do multiple update add HTLC messages because we're potentially routing for multiple paths, like simultaneously. People are requesting for us at a distance to do like hops, like to forward payments through our channel. So we get like a flurry of these, and then it's a configurable policy, like after how many of them do I commit all of those in-flight payments to an intermediate state that can drop the chain if I lose a connection with a peer. And so that's like the commitment signed, and whenever I do a commitment signed, I expect a revoke an ACK, which gives me the ability to revoke my counterparty's version of the previous state of the channel. I respond to a revoke an ACK with a new a new commitment signed, so on and so on. And this is how we continue updating the state of this channel. And so that's what you were seeing scroll through. Over here is the process of like Hashtag sends an offer, as the HTLC, as like an offer to pay distr if distr can provide a secret. Distr, once that HTLC has been finalized cryptographically, like onto the channel so that it can drop the chain, like if necessary, now it's safe for them to make the same offer to tondes. Like, I will pay you if you can provide me with the secret. Tondes created the secret in the first place, right, because I'm the one getting paid. So I provide the secret, settle the first payment. Now, distr has the secret and is able to settle the payment on the channel back to Hashtag, payment atomically finalized. Yeah, so that's, you could go arbitrarily further deep into Lightning, but Thomas says we have limited time. I want to respect all of that. So we'll talk just a little bit about like why, despite the fact that this is extremely cool and you should totally make small scale use of it, Like, it is not super production ready today. So this is like about 11,000 lines of code, of regular Hoon code. It's like a little bit less, but I have much longer than normal like Hoon lines worth of code. It is like enormous, and it's handling people's real Bitcoin. Like just like purely on size and complexity, it should really be like security audited or like. But the only people who can security audit are like Bitcoin devs who are also Hooners, and that's basically only me. So there's like there's an issue there, but like some specific issues that come in with Gall is just the need to pile a whole bunch of complex state machines into a single application. Because breaking them out into separate Gall agents would only cause complexity explosion in I/O, which is very difficult to get right. And if those agents lose touch with each other, it's just as much a security problem or more than the fact that, for example, channel.hoon, this is just the state machine for running a channel, right? So I get like all those update add HTLC messages, right? I run an update. I have an update queue of like those and updates to the on-chain fees that our commitments commit to paying, which is like a big part of Lightning's security story. And what we do is we have a state machine that processes that event log in order to deterministically produce what the next commitment transaction should be, as seen from both sides of the channel, which means that like the other side can just send me a signature of what like I can parallel reconstruct like their commitment transaction should have to look like based on my update log, and I can deterministically verify that signature. So we have all of that. Right, we have Volt.Hoon, so then there's the channel close process. There are like 34 different cases of how a channel can close, like cooperative, simple, forced close, not simple, but at least you're not, like no one's attempting to cheat on you. You don't have to use that like revocation secret logic. And then like a cheating attempt, which is actually like simpler than like a regular forced close because you just use the one revocation secret as your spending pattern for like all of the outputs except your own balance. But like nonetheless, where was I? I was looking at handle payment update. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, so like the close process right now is like we ingest a new Bitcoin block and we search for a whole variety of transactions that we might see in a block if someone was force closing or cooperative closing or we force closed recently or someone is trying to cheat us. Or one of these processes was launched in the past because they're like reorgs have to be taken into account, right, to a certain depth, like up to 6 blocks, something like that. I mean, there hasn't been a 6-block reorg in a decade, but like for safety's sake, and also because there's a second layer of transactions that spend the HTLC outputs that are themselves revocable, blah blah blah, and so like we have this like handle block TXs, right, is doing this like state machine like. And please don't judge my Hoon like too badly. Like I would like Volt to be like max of autism of Urbit, autism of Bitcoin. And it's not that today, and that's why it needs to be rewritten before you use it in production. But like, yeah, so we're running this machine of passing through all of these scenarios like in a given block for like all of our channels and all of the things that used to be channels but are now sets of just like HTLCs of concern that could exist on chain. And anyway, like all of these state machines for running the channel, for running the close process, for monitoring it after the fact, there is no like hard boundaries in between them, which makes it really difficult to reason about like what has gone wrong when something goes wrong, what is going to, and so on. Like, it works like very nicely for these payments and for cooperative close, like basic force close cases, opening. But like, in the event of adversarial action, like it's war room situation because of the high degree of complexity that would be involved in even being able to tell like how it had been attacked because of this model, which is why it needs to be rewritten in Shrubbery. Which is the next thing. Like, people can interrupt me with questions also, like anytime about how this is set up. Sorry, Liv.
How does rewriting this in Shrubbery make it easier to reason about, or otherwise, maybe easier to recruit another Bitcoin dev to whom?
Yeah, so let's pivot to whiteboard. So like, versus the closed processing state machine that I was just showing you, the way I envision doing this in Shrub is that under fast volt, we have faz chans, and we have like faz some bolt ID. Right, okay, so we have like maybe two types of children. We have faz messages, which gives us this state machine for doing the updates, right? And we bind this like in the way that Liam was talking about a shrub pattern for like a non-monadic thread-like pattern, where you have like a kid binds the next kid, binds the next kid, and then you roll up facts like from that entire queue of children, each with its own transactionality boundary for what's beneath it, get a final state, and then tombstone that set, that list, right? That's your channel.hoon. Most of your state machine lives under there. Later, when I want to close the channel, I bind in a new state machine called close. Close manages all of that process for one channel with one set of keys, like one message history to read from. Like instead of processing this for like all of the closes and all of the different cases that the close could possibly be in, right? Instead, this close is going to, it only has access to the information that it needs. It is only managing one close process. It can have as a dependency like a BTC mempool tracker, which is the same one that, you know, I have like another channel, right? Different BID. I also close it. It has its own closed shrub underneath, and it has the same dependency. And so, like, you know, obviously in some ways, like the data flow from the perspective of Earth or the Earth-Mars combination is the same, but like the closed shrub understands itself to be handling a single close for a single channel, and what exists beneath it is bound in as needed. Right, so I don't, like, I bind, if I get into the situation where I need to revoke second layer HTLC spend transactions, right, at this point, like, I bind in, like, watch spend, right, and this binds in its own, so like Liam has the pulse timer, right, like a clock, it binds in a pulse that's going to poll BTCD all on its own, only for the one thing that it actually needs to manage and spend. And it can be, and that, so there's like different kinds of spends to watch in different cases. And like I can inject that, configure it at the time that I bind that shrub, like for that particular case. Right, so this makes this like, not only does this make it much easier to reason about the security of this, because like, you know, like LND or CLN have much larger teams and more capital and security audit firms that go into like them being the production nodes used today. I mean, it's pretty amazing that like me and Dasran working part-time for a little while for not like, you know, with like not much support, did as far as we did, and like that this works, right? So I think with Shrubbery, we can take that a little further to just like a couple of guys with like not that much support can build something that is at least as production ready as LND and CLN. But also that when we break out these protocols in this way, it means that we can experiment like on these protocols. So that we can introspect into messages and say like, so today a big problem with Lightning is just like how many instances in which the spec says like if your counterparty does this, like falls out of contact for more than a second, or like sends a malformed message, or like sends like a fee update message. This is a good example because like you can have different views of the fee market, and you could make like what your counterparty would see as like a stupid request to change fees or something like that, right? There are various instances in which like the spec says like you must fail the channel, which means like you do a force close, you push this whole huge expensive commitment transaction up the chain, and you pay the cost. So like a cooperative close is just like a spend from the multi-sig that anchors this channel. It's pretty cheap. Actually spending, like posting one of these commitment transactions costs a lot. And so if you have a lot of force closes, that reduces the margins for running an operating node tremendously, which also centralizes the topology of the payment network, because now you need to be able to put like, you know, $1 million of liquidity in Bitcoin into one of these things in order to have a good enough operating margin for it to be profitable to like run the node, right?
Real quick.
Yeah.
Has no one figured out how to do the like non-sleeping equivocation trick for Lightning? I know Jeremy Rubin figured this out for his like state chains thing.
What, like Ellen symmetry?
The idea that if you double sign some sequence of things at the same height, that means that you sign with a Schnorr key with the same nonce or two different things, which ultimately leaks your key. I'm surprised that no one has figured out how to carry that over to Lightning to make force closes like constant size?
We should talk about that afterwards. Yeah. But this is like what I'm thinking here with the protocol experimentation is along the lines of your like exponential backoff idea, because it's the idea that it shouldn't be just like, you know, we only have like 3 states. Like either we keep the channel open, or we cost ourselves all the money on chain, or it's so bad that we sweep the entire contents of the channel from one person to the other. Like the penalty is everything that you have, because the thing is you have to keep around all of the very bad, like old state update that you're never supposed to broadcast data is what you have to keep around in order to respond to an adversary's like broadcasting of old data. So there's kind of like this circularity here where it's like you have to keep around the toxic waste as a safety measure against other people's toxic waste. And I don't think this actually provokes revocation events like all that often today. The force closes like caused by peers dropping out of contact, that sort of thing is a bigger problem. But the inability to like introspect, to safely introspect the individual steps of the messaging protocol and the update process and apply differential policies to it in a way that's easy to reason about, I think does block creative work on the protocol. And it's also stuff that could be reused in other protocols on Shrubbery. You know, I mean, my intention is to make like, you know, the channel shrub, messages shrub, things like that, stuff that you, as much as possible, that you can pick out, rip some detail out of, and reuse somewhere else, right?
It would be sick if like Urbit was the securest possible lightning node for that very reason. Get all the big heavy LPs that want to use Urbit for that.
That's the plan. How are we doing on time? Do people want me to like keep rambling? I could go about this indefinitely, else people who just care about it could stick around. Huh? Spur God, okay. Yeah, where is it? Oh, so like limitations, so like practically, like, so what are some of the things that like are different between like Earth Lightning and Volt like as it exists today? One, so like what you saw was a 2-hop payment, right? That's the most that we do. We do 2-hop payments, not like arbitrarily long onion routing, which is how Lightning normally works. And that middle hop needs to be running LND on the host next to them, because they also act as gateways out to Earth Lightning. So you can use those bridges, so distr.z like you connect to some ship that is running, in addition to Volt, is running Volt Provider, which is just like an RPC interface for the LND node, and has LND on the host. You can, and distr has a little bit of liquidity out to the external Lightning network, which I'll add more as needed. Liam? Using Volt?
Yeah.
No. I will. At Palestra. You guys should all come to Palestra Bureau in August. Yeah, so there's a variety of reasons for that. Like mainly, like for example, you know, we don't need to do onion routing in order to do like multi-hop payments. Like, you know, I could add in the same logic such that like, you know, Mischief could pay Liam to pay distr to pay me, right? But I think doing like the kid version of onion routing is stupid compared to just like actually like getting an onion routing library that can be used by everybody on Urbit and then use that for forwarding like these arbitrary chains of packets. There are issues with LND with being able to forward long onion chains like through to Earth or vice versa, like somebody being able to do multi-hop on Earth to multi-hop on Mars like to a destination that require like PRs to LND. So there's just like some extra overhead to baking that in. I kind of wish I had done it in retrospect, because some of the shit that is just like hardest to reason about and works the worst is like differentiating between the cases like for these, like, you know, you're a Volt instance that has a Volt provider instance sitting next to it. Like there are different kinds. So like if I want to send, so if I don't share a provider ship with somebody, or I don't have a path through a provider ship directly from on Urbit, from me to provider to them, then what the provider does is routes the payment through the Earth Lightning network to whatever the provider of that other ship is. And so it goes me on Mars to provider, then through Earth to provider, and then on Mars to provider's client. And just like that logic is hairy. It would be much nicer to do it like the elegant way, where we actually just go along arbitrarily long private paths. But anyway, so that is something that needs to be implemented. The fee handling is fairly primitive. That's like one of the you know, there is like definitely a case where you close this thing and like I have to help you manually rescue like your closed funds on chain because like the fee calculation was stupid and you're stuck in the mempool. So it needs like better fee calculation. And then in general, it's just like those 34 closed cases, it's like, it's quite difficult to test. Like you really need to build like an adversary, like a dark vault, and run like a simnet of like vaults and dark vaults and things like to really achieve like proper like confidence and adversarial security. So there's that. What else? And yeah, so and then in general, like, what Lightning does for the limitation of liquidity, right? You need, so for example, the reason Liam sent me the payment instead of me sending him the payment is that he just opened that channel like an hour ago. And so he provides all of the Bitcoin that goes into the channel. So all of that's sitting on his side, right? So he can't receive payments. There's no inbound liquidity for him to receive. He can only send until there's, like once he's sent, well, that amount he now has as inbound liquidity, right? This is obviously like terrible fucking ergonomics, like for a market. What we do on Earth is something called a submarine swap, which is an atomic swap of Lightning funds for on-chain funds, which means that I dispatch a Lightning payment, and the secret that settles that Lightning payment also is required to settle an HTLC transaction for the same amount of Bitcoin minus like a swap fee broadcast on chain. So once I get the proof of payment for my Lightning payment that I pushed out, I can use that proof of payment to spend like the transaction, the UTXO that I just swapped for on chain, like within some timeout period. So the good news is that like you can pay Earth Lightning nodes, which means that you can pay in Lightning today for an Earth submarine swap. So Lightning Labs operates like a submarine swap service that I think I'm gonna get like a lightweight agent to just like, you know, mediate calling that or abstract over pushing a payment to that service because it has some stuff where it like charges differential fees based on how soon you want your swap to confirm and stuff like that. Thomas. Oh, 5 minutes. But we would like to keep, sorry, Liv.
What do we need to do to recruit some Bitcoin devs to get more interested?
Dude, it's really hard, oddly. Like I get like little, like sort of flicker of interest, and like it's tough. I think like the Ethereum thing is hard. I think having a roadmap, like a principled roadmap out there that says like, you know, we host our own identity system, like this is why, it's a separate concern from money and from finance, like I think that would actually go a ways. Wispem?
Follow-up question, how hard is it for somebody to become a Bitcoin dev?
Fairly difficult. It's like, it is its own entire continent of autism, like unto itself that you have to pick up. It's equal. Yeah, I would say it's equal, just like in different ways. Like I think Urbit is better at inculcating the mental model that you need to pick up to understand the stuff than Bitcoin is, but has more weirdness to pick up. Kind of.
Bitcoin is like as autistic, but very boomerish and practical. It's like all about doing it the dumbest possible, most practical way.
And they come up with really cool stuff because of this, you know, and a lot of things for like improving scalability and for like cryptographic tricks that let you replace otherwise expensive on-chain operations that are like really worth picking up and inform a lot of like my thoughts about Urbit and how we should do things. So it's totally worth doing, and especially like just as a Bitcoin dev, like is achievable, and I'm happy to help with anybody, like an apprentice, work with people who want to do that. And then like Lightning dev is like, it's a lot of extra work to really like page that spec like into your head and understand like what its failure cases are and how it actually works under the hood.
There's currently no better forcing function for getting real leak at blockchains than to try to become a Bitcoin dev.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
First one is, I remember you telling me that with Lightning, I can send you a payment, and then you will then send me something that's encrypted end-to-end. To me, it's just a small piece of data in response. Can you hook into that from Vault?
Yes. I mean, so like right now we're like, it's hard coded in that we're like randomly generating pre-images, right? Like a random seed, but like injecting a pre-image is like, that pre-image is the decryption key for some piece of content is like a pretty, is a trivial.
Specifically what I was thinking.
Yeah, so like that's just like a little bit of an extra affordance. Like today, like so the interface for integrating this, like BET dubs, don't do it for a lot of money, but like for integrating this is dead fucking simple. It's just like there is a thread that gets that invoice that I like signaled to Liam, and then pay it, like just requests an invoice and pays it all monadically. It's just one poke, right? And so adding to that poke, I would like to select my pre-image if you wanted to set up. So like what Ted is saying, right, is remember we got this proof of payment, right, whose hash is used to generate the invoice. That proof of payment number can be anything, right? It can be the decryption key for a resource. It can be the resource itself that you're selling somebody. You're selling somebody, I don't know, whatever, your birthday. Don't use your birthday, that might not be safe. But yeah, so it can be whatever you want it to be, which is a really cool pattern, right, for like atomic swapping of data or cryptographic rights for payment. And it can be set up with Volt today. If there's interest in being able to poke in an arbitrary pre-image, I will add it. I would be happy to do that. And like, I would be super excited if somebody made something like that.
My second question is, I'm happy that's the answer.
Yeah.
The second one is, I've heard like people talking about having things like stable coins or like other fungible currencies on, at least on Bitcoin, maybe also on Lightning. I don't know what the status of those is. Like, is there a plan to get those on the Vault?
To say that there is a plan would be a strong statement, but it is my strong intention to do like as soon as I have time and it is feasible. So like the thing, and it is like in Lightning, not just Bitcoin. Like the whole point of Taproot.
Now, is that live?
It is like in alpha form. It is live. Yeah, the first key send, meaning like you don't need to get an invoice from the person. You pick your own secrets and include the secret in the onion that gets to the final. Whatever, it just lets you send like a tip jar payment that is non-interactive, like with the payee. The first key send payment of Taproot stablecoins over real life Lightning was like a month ago. Lalu posted about it. It's really fucking exciting. So the way, do we go into Merkle trees, how Taproot assets work? Okay, so Taproot, okay, so Taproot was a Bitcoin upgrade like 3 years ago or so, which, what? God damn it. Okay. It means you can add shit to your signature and it stays a valid signature and nobody else can see what you added to it except for you, or people who already know that it's there, right? So that thing could be the root of a Merkle tree, right? Which means like we have a tree, we have a bunch of leaves, right? A binary tree. We like hash the leaves, we hash the parents together, and we hash until we get to the root. Okay, the things in the leaves are Bitcoin scripts, right? And they are different scripts that could spend this key. So think of them as like contract outcomes, right? That is the usual usage of Taproot. So Taproot assets, what it does is it has a sparse Merkle sum tree, which means that like every possible leaf exists in the tree, and the ones where there isn't anything are, by convention, are 0, and the ones where there is something is the balance of your USD Bitcoin, or whatever, right? And then in addition, these leaves are constantly committing to the sum of the balances in them, right? So if you have like two people's balances, then like that parent hash will also commit to the sum of those balances all the way up to the root, at which point it commits to the supply of the asset. And it says there will only be 1 million of these things. And so whenever we go from one Taproot output to the next Taproot output, we can prove that like the balance that I destroyed by sending it somewhere else, it is now 0 in the tree. We have a proof of exclusion, which Merkle trees don't normally have. We have a proof of inclusion of the new balance that I sent to, and we have a proof that the supply didn't change. There was no inflation of the underlying asset. Okay, bam, we got a fucking token. Right, so the cool thing is that these Taproot outputs can be on a Lightning commitment transaction, right? Which means that you can have the stablecoin, the Taproot asset, inside of the Lightning channel, and it can have a state update process inside that ledger, just like the Bitcoin itself. And the root doesn't need to be aware of that. Only the edges do. So like I pay Hastuck to pay Mischief to pay Dister or whatever. Only me and Dister need to worry about the conversion rate between the asset and the Bitcoin at either end. In the middle, we just use Bitcoin for routing, which means that we can take advantage of the existing network liquidity and topology that we have for routing today. This is like cool stuff, and it is like not, I don't know, I have like, at least I have like some provisional willingness of Lightning Labs to like coordinate with us in like ingesting like proofs of provenance for like our balances of assets on Urbit, like into their, it's called a universe, like think of it as a block explorer, but for stuff that's inside of these Taproot assets, so that we would have like good interoperability and public exposure on doing that. As far as like the engineering lift to like get this going, like I don't think I would do it before Shrub Vault, probably, because like I just don't want to get into the weeds of like piecemeal improvements of like a giant pile of chaos code base. I'd rather like it be a state that it should be in before like then we can like really modularly bolt in this like functionality, test it, experiment with it, etc. So I don't know about time limit. Like we need to wait for Tether, Tether and Circle to release their stable dollars on Bitcoin anyway, which I imagine will be like another year. So like we have some time before that's really economically relevant. But like also, this would not be, I don't think it would be any cheaper than ETH-L1, but it's notable that the same taproot asset structure could probably host the PKI, like fully functional as it is on ETH today. So that is like an option that you should have in mind. It is not impossible for Bitcoin to do this anymore the way it was in 2016 when we decided to go on Ethereum because Bitcoin couldn't do it. All right, that's it.